It'll be a source of tension, but I have to say that given the good vibes that come out of Trump's visit to the UK, his meeting with Starmer, the trade deal with Ursula von der Leyen, the good NATO summit that took place a few weeks ago, Europe agreeing to spend 5% of GDP on defense, Trump agreeing to send more arms to Ukraine. You know, 3 months ago, we were talking about the end of the transatlantic relationship. Today, things look a heck of a lot better. And so I think the even keel that seems to be emerging with European leaders figuring out how to handle Trump, that says to me that Starmer's move on Palestinian statehood will be a speed bump, but nothing that's going to spoil what appears to be a rapprochement of sort.
Now, there's been more reaction coming in from the United States to the news that the British government is prepared to recognise a Palestinian state. Tammy Bruce of the US State Department said it was a slap in the face for the victims of the October the 7th massacre by Hamas. It gives one group hope, and that's Hamas, Ms. Bruce told a briefing. Well, the US President Donald Trump, on his way home from Scotland, was speaking on Air Force One. He said he did not agree with Sir Keir Starmer. Trump said that the UK is going the same as Macron, but it's okay, it doesn't mean I have to agree. Well, joining me now is Charles Kupchan, Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He served as a Senior Director for the National Security Council under President Obama. Good evening to you, Charles.
Hi, good to be back with you.
Well, great to have you with us. Let me just ask you, first of all, what you think is the real significance of this announcement by the British Prime Minister?
I think it is of huge symbolic importance in the sense that you now have both the British and the French governments indicating they're ready to move toward recognition of Palestinian statehood. The practical implication is, at this point, non-existent because we're not anywhere near getting a two-state solution. But this is in many respects a primal scream of frustration with the situation in Gaza. Trump himself came out yesterday and said, this is starvation. Let's call it what it is. And there's just a rising crescendo of discontent in the international community with what's happening in Gaza. And that for now is taking the form of these two indications of readiness to recognize Palestinian statehood. The idea is we need to put pressure on the Israeli government.
The Israeli government Prime Minister has put out a statement saying the move rewards Hamas's monstrous terrorism and punishes its victims. And we've also had similar comments from a briefing by the US State Department saying it's a slap in the face for the victims of the October the 7th massacre by Hamas. Although, just to be clear, Sir Keir Starmer did make it clear that Hamas could have no role in any future government in Gaza. What do you make of those reactions?
Well, you know, I think that we have seen the results of outside pressure just in the last 48 hours. I actually just came back from Israel yesterday, spent 8 days there, and Saturday night into Sunday morning, there was a game-changing announcement, which is that the Israelis were going to implement pauses every day in key areas of Gaza so that UN aid and other aid trucks could get in. I don't think are headed quickly toward a ceasefire, but I think that the Israelis have heard loud and clear that the status quo was untenable and that the system that was in place, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, simply wasn't working. Food was not getting into the hands of the people that needed it. When people were lining up to get food, it turned into chaos, and a good number of them were shot. And I also think that Netanyahu is beginning to realize that it hasn't worked to restart the war. The idea of somehow eradicating Hamas militarily hasn't really led to any significant movement, more death and destruction. There needs to be a political solution, not a military solution. And now that the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, is in recess, I think Netanyahu has more political room for maneuver. So right now, I think we're in a fluid situation inside Israel.
Those conditions which Keir Starmer announced, saying that he was going to make this move to officially recognize a state of Palestine unless Israel takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, reaches a ceasefire, makes clear there'll be no annexation in the West Bank, and commits to a long-term peace process that delivers a two-state solution. I find it slightly odd that he says he's going to do this move unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire, because, I mean, surely if Israel agrees to a ceasefire, that would be the time to really try and press ahead towards this two-state solution, which seems to be the only plan that could possibly be acceptable, even though it's been rejected many times by Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of conditionality is a little bit strange. In my own mind, I'm sort of where you are, which is that right now the key goal has to be to get food and medicine and water into Gaza because there's a humanitarian emergency that has already broken out and it's getting worse. And then, secondly, to permanently end the conflict and begin the discussion about the day after. You know, having just come out of Israel, I was amazed. There is no day after plan. There's no sense of whether the Palestinian Authority is going to come in or whether they're going to work with locals in Gaza or whether Israel's going to stay put. It is past time to begin to have that conversation. And then once you have quiet, once you have a sense of some sort of day after political structure, then the conversation can begin about statehood. Right now, that's a conversation that is really at best theoretical.
It isn't part of the problem with all of this, as Sir Kim Darroch was pointing out to us on the programme last night. He's a former national security advisor, and I'm sure you're aware, also a former ambassador to the US. I mean, yes. There isn't a state of Palestine that's anywhere near the legal definition of such a thing. There is no state, there are no agreed borders, there's no agreed government in place, and so on, and that by simply making a declaration like this, it doesn't make it happen.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make it happen, and it may not be effective in getting there, in the sense that, you know, this is a process that needs to build. It needs to be sequential, and right now, many Israelis are still living with what I would call post-traumatic stress syndrome. I mean, October 7 really did put Israelis in a place where they feel very unsafe in their neighborhood, and where Palestinians in Israel and in the West Bank have really felt unsafe living next to Israeli Jews. I do think that, you know, there is a potential light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense that in the aftermath of October 7, Israel's response, even though leading to a humanitarian emergency in Gaza and violence that is uncontrolled in the West Bank, has also led to the dismantling of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of a regime change in Syria, and a serious setback to Iran's nuclear program and to the Iranian leadership. Under the right circumstances, one could tell a story about a radical realignment in the region in which a Palestinian state or Palestinian self-determination of some sort becomes a realistic outcome. But we're still far from that, and a lot of work needs to be done in the interim. Yes, it will take pressure from outside, but in the end of the day, it is Israelis and Palestinians that have to find their way to live peacefully together.
Let me just ask you a little bit more, just briefly, if you could, about the
Sure.
reaction in the United States. President Trump appears to have been pretty measured so far, but we've had this State Department spokesperson saying that this is a slap in the face for the victims of October the 7th. Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has absolutely gone out of his way to try and stay on the right side of the US president. Do you think that this could drive something of a wedge between our two countries?
I think it'll be a source of tension, but I have to say that given the good vibes that come out of Trump's visit to the UK, his meeting with Starmer, the trade deal with Ursula von der Leyen, the good NATO summit that took place a few weeks ago, Europe agreeing to spend 5% of GDP on defense, Trump agreeing to send more arms to Ukraine. You know, 3 months ago, we were talking about the end of the transatlantic relationship. Today, things look a heck of a lot better. And so I think the even keel that seems to be emerging with European leaders figuring out how to handle Trump, that says to me that Starmer's move on Palestinian statehood will be a speed bump, but nothing that's going to spoil what appears to be a rapprochement of sort between Trump and his European allies.
Charles Kupchan, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a former senior director for the National Security Council in the United States. Really good to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you. Good night.